Nick with CC Menus here, and today I'm going to show you how I've been painting some really trippy terrain. So, I went through a weird phase a few months ago of listening to a genre of music called vaporwave. It's like slowed down 80s sound bits mashed together and distorted, has music from commercials. It's weird, but I enjoyed it. The thing that really drew me in though was the art. I mean, look at this stuff. It's just bonkers cool. So strange, so surreal. The artwork is what inspired me to paint this terrain using a color palette that is essentially the colors from a sunrise. The terrain is a free set of 3 files on thingiverse called, and I'm gonna butcher this, but it's Ulvheim ruins, and I printed them on Ender 3, scaled it so it was 3 inches tall, which is perfect for Warcry games. Now, before we get into it, the goal is not to have the most technically correct look and finish. I'm not going for a golden demon on this terrain, or even what I would consider a good tabletop standard. The goal of this technique is to work fast and use a bit of knowledge in color theory and process colors to create very eye-popping, somewhat trippy looking terrain. We'll get into that color theory in a bit. It's really not that hard, but let's get started. What you're seeing me do here is after I prime the terrain with a dark blue rattle can. I'm doing a quick zenithal with Vallejo extra blue, trying to focus more on the top 60 to 70% of the terrain and where the stone tiles are furthest from the walls. For FDM 3D printed models, using a regular can of spray paint or spray primer tends to work better than using the ones branded for miniatures. Non-miniature focused spray primer tends to go on a little bit thicker than the miniature stuff, which fills in the resolution lines left by the 3D printing process. So after the zenithal with the blue, the next step is to start the transition from blue to pink. I did this with a passive magenta on the top half of the ruins, making sure there's a nice smooth transition from all the way blue towards the bottom to all the way magenta at the top. Next, I did a quick sloppy edge highlight on the stone floor of the ruins with electric blue. After that, I took some violet ink and airbrushed it into the recesses of the terrain. I just wanted the value to be a little lower in these areas to push the contrast. I think next time I would do this step prior to edge highlighting the stone tiles. Remember when I said we're not going for golden demon here? Let's just do this quickly. I'm going to do some really sloppy edge highlights. I'm not concerned about how thin and perfect I can make these highlights. I have another 10 pieces of terrain around the sides I need to get done, and ain't nobody got the time for that. Load the brush up with thinned, flowy paint and just get in there. The first color we're using is electric blue again from Vallejo. After that is done, it's time to add in a bit of purple to the edge highlights. Before starting this project, I took the blue and pink paints I'm going to use and mixed up a couple bottles of paint to save time. One is 75% blue and 25% pink. One is about half and half. And the last one is 25% blue, 75% pink. Mixing them together beforehand saved me so much time on this and will continue to save me as I paint this set of terrain. It also helps keep the colors consistent throughout. So next edge highlight color is going to be the 50-50 mix. And you can see with every new color of highlights, I'm going back to the previous layers to ease the transition between the highlight colors. And I guess now would be as good of a time as ever to ask that if anyone is interested in seeing future videos, go ahead and subscribe. Next is going to be the 75% pink mix, where I continue edge highlighting and touching the previous rows of bricks, focusing on the bricks in the middle. You also notice that I always highlight the bricks that form the edge of the window with one step up of highlights. This draws the eyes to those details. Now we are going to move on to the pure pink. This is Liquitex Basics Acrylic Fluorescent Pink and is not really meant for minis. This paint is not very pigment dense and it is pretty translucent due to it being fluorescent paint. This means that you can really go on thick, like don't even worry about thinning this stuff down. I know it feels so wrong to do this, but just slather the paint on there and try to move the paint with your brush so it's thickest near the edges. I still recommend doing a couple coats like this to really build up opacity, because this paint, man, you can see right through it. Okay, remember in the beginning when I mentioned color theory and process printing? Well, here's the next highlight color. Little weird. Yeah, it's just straight up bright yellow. Crazy, right? We are entering into the ugly stage of the painting where it looks real weird. We'll get through this, trust me. I don't want to get super bogged down into the details of color theory and process printing, but in process printing, which is the use of colors CMYK, cyan, yellow, magenta, black, to make bright, warm colors like oranges and reds, they first have to print yellow and then do a layer of translucent magenta on top. Doing this optically mixes the colors as opposed to physically mixing them like we do with paint. Because we're working with such a translucent pink, we can do that here as well. So with this yellow, I'm going to highlight all the areas that I want to be the brightest, hottest, warmest pink. And honestly, it's going to turn into a bit of a sweet, saturated orange, but it still reads as pink. So once the yellow is down, we're ready for what I think is the most satisfying thing ever in this hobby. At least, it was super satisfying for me. I'm going to take that pink and do a very thick glaze on top of all the yellow I just laid down. I mean, just look at this transition. Isn't it crazy how the yellow just seems to pierce through the pink, but totally change to a different color? I really love it. After covering all the yellow, I'm going to slowly build up more and more pink until I'm satisfied with how bright the upper bricks are. Now, I could stop here, but I kind of want to push the contrast a little bit more. To do this, I'm going to take some black paint. I'm using Vallejo Game Air Black, but really any black will do. I'm going to go in and hit all of the grout with black. And with the grout painted, that's it. Well, at least for this side of the ruins. So yeah, that's it, guys. That's how you paint this. You can apply it to a whole bunch of different stuff, just like this creepy little head of Hercules over here. It's like he's staring into my soul. Now I have a whole Warcry table that I'm going to be painting up like this, all using free files that I found on Thingiverse. So if you're interested in seeing that or any more painting videos, go ahead and subscribe, and you'll see more in the future. Until next time, take care.